For being here and for following directions that are given on the floor. We are going to start this briefing. Happy to welcome TEDCO to the Economic Matters Committee. Looking forward to this briefing. If each of you, whoever it is that's part of the briefing, come on up. Hit your buttons, talk into the mic, because sometimes just because we needed to catch you. And if you want to just start by introducing everyone who's up there, and then we'll hand it to you and we'll take questions at the end. They need to be lit, so yeah, just hit the mic. There you go. Oh, don't touch it now.
There we go.
Now you're good.
Good morning. Again, thank you for having me. My name is Troy Lamel Stovall. I serve as the CEO of TEDCO. I have my two colleagues who will introduce themselves in a moment, and then they'll give more of a detailed presentation. I just want to thank you all for having us. This is our first time in front of the Economic Matters Committee. We normally are at another committee, so thank you for having us. So I'll let my two colleagues introduce themselves.
Good afternoon.
Still couldn't hear me. Is that better? Sorry, I can hear myself too.
My name is Rachel Brewster. I am the chair of the Maryland Stem Cell Research Commission.
And my name is Abhishek Kulshrestha. I go by Abhi, and I'm the executive director for the Maryland Innovation Initiative.
So I'm not gonna, you have a large document in front of you. We will not be going through every single page, I can promise you. And again, Madam Vice Chair, we want to actually allow for conversation. We know this is our introduction, introducing you to TEDCO. So let me start with that. So TEDCO, we've been around for 27 years. We are, I like to describe us as we are a combination of an economic development entity. Oops. Oh, yeah, you did tell me to do that, and I didn't follow instructions, so see, there you go. We're a combination of an economic development entity. We also are an ecosystem development entity, as well as a venture capital. A lot of people know our venture capital side, but the other two pieces are just as important, because what we do is we provide, here from two of our very successful programs, our goal is to take great ideas, wherever those ideas emanate from, whether that's somebody's garage, whether it's their head, whether it's the back of a napkin, and or lab, whether that's a research lab at a university or federal lab or corporate lab. We take all those great ideas and we bring them to market, and we bring impact, and you'll hear us talk about impact. And so this is where I'll spend most of my time at, because this really, if there's any page you want to look at and understand what we do at TEDCO, this is the page. And what I'd like to talk about with TEDCO is that our job is to touch these entrepreneurs, touch these innovators, touch them in such a way that we accelerate their growth, which is why I like this, because you have this hockey stick as it starts to accelerate. And as you work your way from left to right on this page, and I'm an old engineer math individual, so this is good for me. I can talk about the x-axis and the y-axis. If you look along the x-axis, that's the stage in which a company is progressing. So they're progressing from that research stage where we're providing grant dollars, and as you progress along that x-axis, you see they move into what we call our venture, become venture ready in our venture, and I'll talk more about that. If you look along up the y-axis and you see the separation across from left to right, you'll hear us talk about how we work from the universities, our federal labs, and bringing those ideas and bringing them into the corporate world through the various programs, particularly our MII and stem cell efforts. And if you look at this box, look at this diagram, you see the gray boxes and the red boxes. The gray boxes are our grant funds. Those are funds that we're providing, and I still call all of them investments, as my friends at Stem Cell know, because they're still investments, even though it's not a traditional investment term, we're looking for a return, but there's a return to the ecosystem that we're seeking. So it's not the traditional financial return, but there is an ecosystem return that we are looking for. And so you'll hear more about from Stem Cell and MI, the grant functions they have, but even MI in the later stage of their investments, they're doing actual investments. And as you see, as we progress along that x-axis, as we move companies to become more venture ready, as we like to call them, venture ready or investment ready, we are making actual investments through our funds, our social impact funds, our seed funds, and our venture funds. And let me spend just a moment of each of those. And before that, actually, we have one set of buckets. So we actually, as companies move from that gray to red, we actually know that there are a number of companies, good afternoon, sir. We have to know there's companies that are 100% venture ready. They're right between still coming out of a lab or coming out of somebody's garage, and they're what we call in our world a minimum viable product, or MVP. They're pre that. And so we actually have monies called the concept capital that we just started last year. We're putting $25,000 into companies that move them from those ideas that are still nascent into becoming venture ready. We've been very successful in moving companies along this x-axis. But as they get venture ready and get investment ready, again, you'll hear more from Abhi about how they're moving these our research into investment readiness and investment and being invested in. We are also investing them through our social impact, seed, and venture funds. Our social impact funds, as they talk about, because we recognize that there are going to be a lot of, by the way, we invest by statute in tech and life science enabled companies. And so the definition of tech is a broad thing. And so I tell two jokes to get people to understand what tech enabled means. So my first one is, if the Jeffersons, if George and Weezy Jefferson, and some of y'all, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go check out YouTube. If George and Weezy Jefferson want to come back and start a cleaning business, and that cleaning business uses technology to clean clothes better, faster, or cheaper, it's that technology that TechCo wants to invest in. And so that's what we want to invest in. So another good example to try to tell you this, have you ever heard of the wine called 19 Crimes? 19 Crimes is just it's a decent table wine. Actually, on the cover of it, they have people like Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg. But next time you go, it's a decent wine. Next time you get it, go get it, and there's a QR code on it. The QR code, you put your phone up to it, and the QR code will have Snoop talking to you. That's not the technology part. The technology part is they're pulling consumer data from you. And so they disguise a wine company as a consumer data company. My last example, Madam Vice Chair, I'm sure you have your favorite restaurant you'd like to go to, wherever. So if that favorite restaurant geolocates you and knows where and when you're going to be coming closer, and if they had your favorite table with your favorite drink and your favorite food available to you, you would pay a little extra for that, I'm sure. And what if on another night you're there with your family and friends and they're running low on whatever your favorite dish is on that, and they come to you and say, hey, Madam Vice Chair, we'll give you this for 75% off. You probably would love that restaurant, right, ladies and gentlemen? And what if, Madam Vice Chair, I say, wouldn't you pay, say, $5 a month to get that level of service from that restaurant? We just made that restaurant a technology-enabled SaaS company. And so there's all kinds of ways to turn what are traditional retail companies, consumer-oriented companies, into what we, and so I bring that up as social impact, because a lot of what we do with social impact is turning those ideas, which may or may not ever get to an investment readiness for other venture capitalists to look at, or other investors look at. We will still put dollars into those companies because they might become a $5, $7, $10 million company somewhere here in Maryland doing great, paying great wages, and maybe pay us back 1x our return. We will celebrate that 1x in the same way we celebrate like the 10x we got last week from a traditional venture investment. Because, by the way, a lot of our money is evergreen. So the money, some of the money you've given us, we have to continue, get the returns and reinvest those dollars, which brings me to the seed investment funds. As companies progress along the x-axis, they're at that really critical stage where they've gone beyond that, they have a good idea that's market ready, and they maybe have a product that's market ready, but they still haven't gained traction with the customers yet, or they're still, if they're a life science company, still going through some clinical trials or some other types of trials. So our seed funds do that. They bridge them between that early stage, seed stage, all the way through the venture stage, because we want to get everybody to the venture stage. The venture stage is what you traditionally see of venture capital. We're investing in what's called the alphabet rounds, what's called the Series A, Series B rounds. And we're doing what's also called a price round. In other words, we're now pricing the round, because our investments go in, I'm getting a little technical here, my apologies. Our investments normally go in using an instrument that's kind of a pseudo debt equity type of thing. So in other words, we still have an obligation like debt, but gives us equity like responsibilities and opportunities. And so the venture stage is what we want to get people to. And so when we get them to the venture stage, they're normally revenue generating or later in their clinical trials if they're life science. And we see an opportunity to, hello, madam, we see an opportunity to partner with other venture funds or even other angel funds to get them, because our goal is to exit. And we normally will exit, I mentioned the alphabet rounds, we were normally exiting when we get to like a C round. At a C round, you get very large institutional capital into place, and we're taking our exit and we're getting multiple stages. So if you look at our traditional metrics, as I begin to, I think, close out some of my talk here. Oh, I do want to talk about that. When you look at people like PitchBook and NASDAQ, they've recognized our work as some of the best in the country at what we do. Recognize our work in terms of our returns. Our returns are some of the best in the country. So if you look at our return profile, even though we're limited, and I should say, only required to invest in the state of Maryland, and we have other restrictions on us, other venture funds do not have that. Our last returns here in the last, 3 years, we've gotten almost a 2.8 multiple on investment capital. In other words, for every dollar we put in, we've gotten almost $3 back, which puts us in the top quartile with other traditional venture funds, which don't have the same restrictions that we do. If you look at over a life of our fund, we're at 1.0, what's called multiple on invested capital. That means we're giving back at least $1. Again, that puts us in best in class in terms of other funds. If you look at other metrics for us, we're at about over $200 million of assets under management. We have another $50 million of funds that we have under strategic partnerships, which brings me to the work that we're doing in our strategic funds. So we think of these pillars, how we're funded through 4 pillars. The first pillar is the fund that you provide to us, and we want to thank you for that and continue investing in TEDCO that you provide to us. We have about a $60 million budget at TEDCO, and that includes all the entities that you see here represented. But we also have been very aggressively going after, through the work of Stephen Alville, who's sitting back here, going after federal funds. And I joke with Stephen, he's done a tremendous job there just in the last 2.5, 3 years, that if we were a baseball player, we'd probably be in the Baseball Hall of Fame twice with the batting average that he's been able to succeed in the funds we've been able to secure from our federals. The third pillar is our philanthropy. We've been we're early going on after philanthropy dollars, working with a number of folks, both nationally, internationally, and locally, looking at philanthropy. But the last one I want to spend a moment on is our venture. And so we've been very aggressively going after traditional venture capital dollars. And so we just recently announced at our expo back in October that we're working with a $50 million fund from our friends in Taiwan. We just announced from South Korea a $6.5 million investment, which will lead to about a $30 million fund for South Korea. And I'm expecting some investments from folks in the UAE, from some work that we're doing. I just visited the UAE, and we actually have a visit to Jordan coming up in May to secure some. That was from the work that the governor was doing in Jordan. And so the point is being that we're trying to bring additional capital to the state that's looking at bringing investments to the state of Maryland and looking for opportunities. Because remember I talked to you about the acceleration of our companies? This is the goal, to open up markets to these companies. But for would not be able, a small company that's here in Maryland having access to the Asian market that they would not be able to get access to. We actually have a company, one of our life science companies, that is going to be able to probably go to Taiwan here in the next few months and get manufacturing support because of this relationship that we built with Taiwanese. As I begin to close and transition to my colleagues, as I mentioned before on this page, what you see, we aren't just writing checks. We're surrounded that entrepreneur. I mentioned touches. We want to make sure the entrepreneur has whatever tools they need for their success, whether that's a lawyer, whether that's a wet lab, whether it's access to a computer, whether it's access to talent, whatever they need. And so you see a number of the efforts that we have, and you can ask us any questions about that are here. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over. I'll come back to close out some stuff, but I do want to first introduce Dr. Brewster. And I'm going to go there.
Thank you. Is that my first slide?
It is.
Okay. So the Maryland Stem Cell Research Commission is administered by TEDCO and was established in 2006 through the Stem Cell Research Act, an effort between the General Assembly and the Governor's Office. And this fund has been very impactful in Maryland. Our primary goal is to improve health through stem cell research and through discoveries that are made, for the most part, in universities in the Maryland area. We also pair these universities with companies to be able to move their products closer to patients. And in so doing, in supporting this stem cell research, we are also building the economy and increasing the workforce in Maryland. So you see a few numbers there. We have given over $200 million to researchers and companies in the Maryland area. We have supported over 47 entities, and I should say that they span from Johns Hopkins to our state schools, College Park, Eastern Shore, Towson, and the University of Maryland. And there has been a tremendous return on our investments, as I will emphasize in the following slide, or in a couple. So MSCRF, or Maryland Stem Cell Research Foundation, started out initially with 2 funding opportunities and has now expanded to 7. So those are the circles, the colored circles that you see. So we fund everything from the initial discovery made in laboratories to commercialization, clinical trials, and all the way through manufacturing, which is, I think, particularly relevant to this committee. So through our manufacturing efforts, which I should say align very well with Governor Moore's priorities, we have been able to not only help grow companies in Maryland, but also attract companies abroad. And one example would be NatureCell, which is a Korean company that has now established a base in Maryland. Next slide. So a couple of our success stories are Theradaptive and Rooster Bio. These are different types of companies. The first one is a therapeutic company. The second one is a support company. We have invested fairly early in the establishment of these companies. And with respect to Theradaptive, they now have a clinical trial that is now looking to repair spinal injury with one of their products that promotes bone growth. And they're now trying to move towards the clinic another one that involves dental health. And with respect to Rooster Bio, we invested very early in this company, and they have grown from 4 employees to now 57. The space they occupy has also increased tremendously, and they now have an international reputation.
Yep. You want to start with GMP? Just tell us what GMP means.
Good manufacturing.
Practice, yes. Meaning the best standards possible for whatever product you're producing. Next slide. And so going back to return on our investments, well, and our investments are in the form of research grants. We believe that of the $13 million that we have invested in companies, there has been more than $1 billion in return. So in other words, for every dollar that has been invested, there has been a 17-fold return in terms of private funds. And a lot of the companies that were initially funded under MSCRF have now become public, as you can see listed on the lower right. And I would say, most importantly, what MSCRF does, in addition to building help build the economy and the workforce, is that we find cures for devastating diseases. So we have funded up to 197 different disease indications, shown there on the left. And a couple examples of our success stories is that little boy that you see. He had an immune disease, which is commonly referred to as like bubble boy disease. He was very susceptible to any germs in the environment, and that kept him indoors in a very controlled environment. And after receiving a stem cell transplantation by a physician at Hopkins, he was fully cured. And another really nice story is the one of the young woman that you see in the lower right. She had sickle cell disease, and there were no proper donors for bone marrow for her. Her parents had passed away before she really fully developed this disease. And so there was an effort through Hopkins to produce a drug that would actually reduce the immunogenicity of transplanted bone marrow. So she was able to receive transplants from family members that were a little more distantly related to her. And she's now thriving and actually owns her own business.
You need to close out?
Oh, anything else?
Anything else you want to just close out?
No, that's it. I'm
Okay.
happy to take any questions.
Yeah, so just before I transition to Ivy, a couple of points. Very proud of the work that Stem Cell, and hope I can get through what I'm about to say, that Stem Cell does. Just so you know, the budget, they've got a $15 million budget. And so everything you're hearing about is off of $15 million. So it's a tremendous work that they do. The more personal, back to the picture, two things on this picture. So the little boy you see, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, he was at one of our testimonies. He was there when we were testifying at a budget hearing, and it was amazing because he was running around in his little bow tie. And I mean, everyone was in tears. The story of this young man, and that, again, the work that we're doing helped him. But the more personal one is my sister passed away 4 years ago from sickle cell. And so I am very understanding of and very proud that I'm to be associated with the work that we're doing for sickle cell, because when growing up with my sister, they didn't treat it. All they did was try to make her comfortable, and there was no treatment. So I appreciate the work that Stem Cell and Dr. Brewster is leading. So I don't know if we want to move to questions, or we can, however you want to do it, Madam Vice Chair.
We'll have the whole panel speak, and then we'll take questions.
Absolutely. So with that, I'm going to introduce Ivy and Maryland Innovation Initiative.
Wonderful. Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the committee, for your time. As I mentioned, my name is Avi Kulshrestha, and maybe just as a brief way of talking about the MI program, I'll tell you about the statistic that gets me out of bed in the morning. From the years 2010 to 2020, 90% of innovation sector job growth in the United States happened in 5 metro areas. None of them are in Maryland, and members of this committee certainly know that's not reflective of the places that innovation comes from. Innovation comes from places all over the U.S., and it's not reflective of our talent, which I deeply believe is uniformly spread throughout the U.S. And so I'm a scientist by training. I've dedicated my career to working in science, policy, industry, really understanding the ways that we can ensure that the economic benefits of innovation, investment, job growth, capital investment, accrue to the places where that innovation is actually happening. And so when I first heard about the Maryland Innovation Initiative, I was not living in Maryland. I was actually living in Alabama. And I was looking around the United States for best practice programs that translated findings from the earliest stages of research in the university to the place where they could ultimately have impact, create jobs, drive neighborhood investment. And the Maryland Innovation Initiative came up repeatedly. It's a program with national renown. Full transparency, I did try to start it in Alabama. Alabama Innovation Initiative didn't have the same ring. So a few years later, I moved to the DMV area and was fortunate to find myself as the executive director for the Maryland Innovation Initiative. MII was founded in 2012 as a collaboration between 5 institutions that are shown here: Morgan State, UMBC, UMB, Johns Hopkins, and the University of Maryland College Park. We're unique in that we provide grant and investment funding over multiple phases to get technologies first at our universities to the point that they're ready to be taken to the market. And then from that point, we provide oftentimes the first dollars in to companies that are responsible for commercializing that technology and ensuring that it does create jobs, receive investment. We have been around for 14 years now. We were founded in 2012, and some of our more recent initiatives involve us expanding beyond just these 5 institutions. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Just to make this more concrete for you, as a scientist, I think about the impact of science in 2 ways. One is the actual benefit of the innovation itself, so what it does for us. The other is the actual impact that it creates in a neighborhood or in a region. Two examples that bring this home are listed here. One is Scene Health, which is a spin out of Johns Hopkins University. They were among the first companies to think about rural telehealth. So how do we ensure that we're actually delivering healthcare, especially public health, to Americans regardless of where they live, whether it's in an urban area, whether it's in a rural area, we should all have access to that. We provided their initial funding over both phases, a grant and investment in 2015. In 2019, late 2019, early 2020, they became instrumental to the state of Maryland's COVID response. And not just the state of Maryland, but that of 30 other states. So today, Scene Health employs over 80 people in Maryland. It's still headquartered here. And they are the default rural telehealth provider for public health agencies around the United States. So again, when we think about that dual impact, they not only supported the Maryland Department of Health and other public health agencies in ensuring that people could receive adequate care during COVID, they've also created 80 jobs here in Maryland that are high-skilled, laddered careers that will remain here. The other one that I like to talk about is a company called the North American Wave Engine Corporation that was spun out of the University of Maryland College Park in 2016. And again, a technology that received both our grant and investment funding. They produce a novel jet propulsion system to support the American warfighter. We provided their initial capital 8 years ago. Today, they're still headquartered in Baltimore, and actually this year they began delivery on the J-1 jet propulsion unit, again, which will be responsible for ensuring the American warfighter's superiority. So we invest in technologies across life sciences, information technology, cybersecurity, defense, and we pride ourselves on thinking about, again, not only the impact that's investing in good science, but also investing in science that will ultimately create jobs. We have awarded about $60 million, sorry, Troy, since the inception of the program. We've created 400 sustained jobs, so those are jobs that still exist today. So that's not to include the one-time job creation or jobs that startups sometimes create and then destroy. And then we've attracted over $800 million in follow-on funding, 2/3 that private, 1/3 public. So that's about a 13 times return on the dollar. Thanks, Troy.
No problem.
Over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of increased interest in the program. So just for context, we used to be able to fund about 40 to 50% of applications that we saw come in the door. Today that figure, and actually in this last fiscal year, is closer to 15%. And that's because we've seen our application volume more than triple. I think, to be sure, there are some impacts of the federal, this administration's cuts to research funding. But actually, if you see on the chart, a lot of this increase actually precedes the current federal administration and is more reflective of a maturing of Maryland's innovation ecosystem. We're seeing more and more universities that are excited to get involved in this process, and more folks who are ready and willing and excited to take on investment to carry these technologies forward. And if I can break down just our three priorities for fiscal year 27. The first one, as I mentioned, is while we started with 5 institutions, we are thinking every day about ways to expand beyond those institutions. Some of those opportunities have been made possible already by your colleagues. In 2013, we began a pilot with Bowie State University and Frostburg State University to think about what MII would look like on their campuses. And again, it won't surprise anybody in this room to learn that there is a lot of cutting-edge research happening at Bowie State and Frostburg State, particularly at Bowie in cybersecurity and at Frostburg in environmental engineering. We've been able to support, again, not only the broader culture of innovation and entrepreneurship on those campuses, but also specific technologies that have commercial promise that we're in the process of working with them to spin out and take toward commercialization. And that program sunset in 2024, although we're still very actively working with Bowie State and Frostburg State to identify ways to support their entrepreneurship efforts. In 2025, we had the opportunity to launch a program called the Baltimore Innovation Initiative, which takes MII from, again, just those 5 institutions to every public and private university, college, and community college in the Baltimore Columbia Towson MSA, and that was aligned to the Baltimore Tech Hubs initiative. So if you're keeping count, we went from 5 institutions to 7 with Bowie and Frostburg included, and are now 23 across all those Baltimore Innovation Initiative institutions. And those include not only research-intensive institutions like Hopkins or UMB, but also community colleges. We provided our first grant to a community college, Howard Community College, just this month. And we're looking to do more and more of that. Last year, the legislature passed and the governor signed a bill called the MII Partnership Extension Program that took those 2 pilots, both of which the former sunset, the latter will sunset this year, and rolled them up into one initiative, MII Partnership Extension Program, that enables us to expand to any institution throughout the state of Maryland. There was no funding passed alongside that last year, although as part of that, we've already been doing proactive engagement with each of the with institutions throughout the state of Maryland, on the Eastern Shore, in Western Maryland, Southern Maryland, to identify ways to expand the MII program there. Our second priority is to enhance the engagement between private industry and Maryland's nationally leading R&D base. It doesn't surprise anybody in this room to know that that Maryland is the leading state for research and development in the U.S., although oftentimes what we see lacking is industry ready to take on that innovation on the other side. So how do we ensure that our research and development is actually relevant to the needs that industry has? And so we're doing a lot of work this year to identify what our research base is, what industry needs, and how we as MII can do a better job of connecting those. And that's, so we're hosting a series of roundtables over the course of this year to identify those technology areas and to ensure that industry is ready at the other end to take those technologies up. And the last piece is to coordinate with other state economic development agencies. We pride ourselves on coordination with, obviously, TEDCO and Stem Cell Research Commission colleagues. We see a lot of co-investment across these programs. But we know it's not just necessarily the science and technology, which is our focus. It's also real estate, placemaking. And so we had the director of MEDCO, Tom Sadowski, come speak to our board at our retreat this year to identify ways to better align our programs around specific priority areas. And so that work is emerging, ongoing, and hopefully we'll have more to report back in the next year about ways that we're formalizing some of that collaboration. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop there. But again, this is more on the BI program. But again, thank you very much for your time today.
Well, thank you all. It looks like we have a couple questions for folks who are just coming into the room. We're still on our briefing, which will be a few more moments. We'll start Bill Hearings.
Madam Vice Chair, if you just give me 2 slides, and I'll be very quick.
Oh, you have more? Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Go ahead.
2 very quick slides. I'd be remiss, you've heard my colleagues talk about the impact. So this is an impact study we had done over 2 years ago. We're actually signing a contract to do an update of this. And so we knew when this came out several years ago that these numbers were understated, but it still gives you a sense of the impact over the years of TEDCO. And we actually already know that our portfolio alone, our unrealized value of our portfolio probably dwarfs these numbers. And we have 150 companies in our current investment portfolio right now. And so the point being is that we have, the dollars you've provided us have provided a significant return on the investment. And my last point, I would be very remiss if I did not tell you, we're bringing Expo back. Even though I said at the last Expo it was going to be the last one, I spoke a little too soon. And so we are going to be bringing it back. It'll be going to Baltimore this year at the Hilton there in Baltimore, October 27th. You'll get much more information as we get closer. I know. And so, but that's our testimony. Again, thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Thank you for being here today and for all the work you do. We're going to start with Delegate Chi.
Well, first of all, welcome. I am excited that this restructured Economic Matters Committee now has this portfolio focusing on economic development, and I welcome all of you for coming before us and hope to see more of you in the coming years and days. As you know, I personally have partnered with TEDCO for many years, ever since the beginning of my legislative career, so I have many questions, but for the sake of time, I would just ask a couple questions by way of updates, okay? So you can let us know how we can do better. Because to Avi's point, first of all, congratulations on all the successes in driving tech-led entrepreneurship, which is the future of Maryland. So to Abby's point, that Maryland has a deep bench of R&D, right? But we are not up there in terms of top 5 metro regions for that kind of economic growth, right? So where's the gap? I know, over the years, we have tried to close in on early stage innovation entrepreneurship in helping businesses commercialize, but there's still a long way to go. So could you succinctly tell this committee where are the sort of glaring holes in our whole ecosystem that we need to step up on, okay? We can do better so that we can not just focus on R&D, but actually commercialize the products so that they become something that we can actually use to benefit the society.
Absolutely, and thank you, Madam Chair. I think there's certainly a lot tied up in that question. I think the biggest opportunity that we see is to better engage industry stakeholders, whether they're here in Maryland or whether they should be here in Maryland, to the cutting edge research and development activity that's happening here currently. And I'll give you one example that actually ties into another piece of legislation that we're working on. So right now, there's a big revolution happening in the way that drugs are discovered and developed, and that's this shift away from animal models. No region has yet taken the lead on what that should look like. However, in Maryland here, we're home to the FDA, the leading regulatory experts on how that needs to happen. Johns Hopkins has been home to the Center for Animal Alternative Modeling for 20 years now. How do we ensure that unique regulatory strength and that research area that we have been in for decades actually attracts pharmaceutical companies and contract research organizations here to Maryland to do that work? And the way that we're thinking about it is, how do we create density around these clusters of technologies that are going to be instrumental to industry's ability to move forward? I think, when we think about business attraction efforts, a lot of incentives have become essentially table stakes for states to play in the game. Our focus should now be on how we help industry solve the cutting edge technology problems that they need to solve in order to be productive. And so I think what we're trying to do is identify specific areas like that. There's a revolution right now happening in drug discovery and drug development. There are a lot of step changes being made in advanced manufacturing, as Rachel mentioned. So where can we better identify those pockets of research, which are oftentimes there but not necessarily coordinated? We believe that we can serve a coordinating role in building density and building assets around those to bring industry in. And so the other piece of the puzzle is, of course, how do we make sure that industry actually comes to the table and works on that? There needs to be a clear value proposition for them there. And so that exercise on our part is trying to identify what are those technology grand challenge areas that are ultimately going to lead to them being more successful and productive here.
So, Delegate Chief, first of all, thank you. It's good being here, particularly with you on this committee, and thank you for all the support you've given us over the years, particularly things like SBIR and SCR, the matching grant. No disagreement with my colleague. I'll answer it maybe a little bit different way, and you've heard me maybe say this, that we here in Maryland have a little bit of a young and growing ecosystem. And we have to just be honest with ourselves about that. And part of that is, one is we don't have, like you have in other areas that Abby mentioned, where you have kind of that, what I call the PayPal effect, where you've had one company that's created 75 other companies, and yet we've had some smaller ones. And so you don't have that kind of bench of talent and a bench, frankly, of investment readiness. And also, all due respect to TEDCO and MI and stem cell, we actually don't have a lot of early stage capital at work, vis-a-vis other areas of the country. So when you add those two things up, what we have are a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, which frankly, you saw that list that I showed you of all the stuff. There's a lot of, frankly, just be blunt, hand-holding that has to happen. And that takes a lot more time to do that hand-holding that's required. That's not a bad thing. That's just we have to be honest about that. And so talk about resource. Being able to scale that is tough. Just to be honest with you, that's a tough thing to scale because it is an ultimate contact sport. All due respect to AI, sometimes you just got to have a person to do that. And the other challenge that we do have, back to, and I'm old enough to talk about the notion of spinach, Popeye spinach and kryptonite, right? We have the one thing we have that's both our spinach and our kryptonite. You know what our spinach is? All the research labs we have and all the university labs. That's an amazing spinach. We get more innovation dollars than any other state in the country. But as Abby just mentioned, that's not becoming commercialized. That's our kryptonite. That which is our spinach is also our kryptonite. And so we've got to find a way, everything he said is right. We got to turn that spinach and make it, keep it spinach. as opposed to being kryptonite. And that's what it's doing to us right now.
Thank you. If I may follow up on the second part of my thought. So we're talking about early stage, and I'm not saying we are doing enough, but we are doing a lot in the state of Maryland in supporting early stage, right? So the ideas don't die in the labs. But what I am equally, if not more concerned about, is after we make all these investments to these early stage companies to hold their hands, to make sure they're viable and all of that, we as a state are not competitive in keeping our success stories in our state. And I would love for you to comment on that, because after we cultivate them, after we set them up in incubators and labs and all of that, then we see them migrate, sometimes just across the river because they have lower tax rate. Because let's face it, most drug development companies in early stage or even mid stages don't have market-driven revenues. They have investment money, right? So they don't pay the kind of corporate income tax that other more established businesses pay. So we're not generating the kind of economic return on investment until they have grown up to be certain scale. So, but we are missing that part. So I want you to focus on that business climate portion of it.
Well, I try not to overly comment on tax rates and those types of matters.
Business climate.
Business climate. But what I will say, in answer to your question, again, from where we sit as TEDCO, is there are two things that are driving, particularly in the life science space. One is manufacturing. We don't have scaled manufacturing facilities here, and we are trying to work on bringing those to here. And the second is, I talked about the early stage capital. We also lack the later stage capital. And so a lot of investors are saying, yeah, come and then move. And so those are structural things that we actually can fix, Delegate Chi. We can make better investments in the manufacturing assets, and we can attract better capital, to your point, that will come and stay here. And that's actually some of the work that we're doing at TEDCO. How do we get these investment pools of capital to come to set up a presence in Maryland, not just set up in Boston or in San Francisco or New York, but to actually have a presence in Maryland? And those are two things that we actually are driving. And yes, do tax policy help impact that? I won't debate that, but I'm saying what we're trying to drive to answer your question.
If I could just add to that, I gave the example of NatureCell, a Korean company who has now recently established a branch in Maryland. And part of their decision was actually the fact that we have this Maryland Stem Cell Research Fund right here. And with, the funding, the research funding crisis that is ongoing in this country, these little pools of money to support stem cell research are very precious. And there is not an equivalent to the MSCRF in many states. There's one in California. So we feel like that is also a little gem in terms of stem cell research.
And just to give some idea, there's only two. The one she's talking about here in Maryland and one in California. But one in California, let's just be clear, has a whole lot more zeros attached to its fund than the $15 million we have here in Maryland.
Right. Thank you. For folks who are here for the hearing is going to start at 1:30, so you're welcome to stay and listen, but if you need to go somewhere else and come back, we won't start that till 1:30. We have Delegate Weibel next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate you guys being here, and I appreciate everything you do to promote the cutting-edge technology in Maryland. Couple questions, and I was a little late, I apologize. Did you talk about your funding sources, your total funding? I know you talked a little bit about leveraging federal money.
Yes, sir. So total is $60 million, our total budget, a little under $60 million.
And how much of that is state?
Almost all of that is state, sir.
It's all state, okay. And when you make these investments in these various companies, I assume you have clawbacks, minimum investments, job creation, that sort of thing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and they're all within the state of Maryland?
Yes, sir.
And is there a requirement that they stay a certain amount of time?
Yeah, well, not a certain amount of time, but they have to have 51% of their employment base in Maryland. Otherwise, we have to divest.
Okay. And then kind of to follow up on what Delegate Chi asked, and I don't expect an answer today, but if you could get back to us, because we are supposed to be focused on economic development in this committee now, or certain regulations or tax policy or anything that hampers your efforts to both attract and retain businesses in Maryland? So,
spirit of transparency, we actually have a bill currently before we testified last week that does do that, sir. I just mentioned that when we have a company that has more than, if the company goes off and does what we want it to do, which is to grow, but if they grow for all good reasons outside the state of Maryland, tip more than 51% outside the state of Maryland, we have to, at that very moment, liquidate that investment. And the liquidation actually causes us to lose money. It causes that entrepreneur to have to use money to pay us back at a discount to our market value. And over the last 2 years, we've lost almost $10 million, which would have been money we would have used to reinvest back in the state because of that clause. And so we are asking for the ability to maintain those investments for up to 5 years. So by the way, we're not trying to start an investment outside the state of Maryland. We still have to invest in the state of Maryland. But if a company does what we want them to do, which is to grow, we want to be able to better manage the disposition of that asset.
All right, so that's one example, but I'm thinking more in total broad general terms as far as the entire state. If there's things that we're not competitive in.
Gotcha.
In contrast to other states, I mean, we're all competing against each other.
Will do, sir.
Okay,
Will
thank
do.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Amprey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Delegate Chi, you took like 80% of my questions. So, you know, we got the right person leading the committee, leading the subcommittee. Mr. Stovall, always good to see you, brother. I appreciate the work that you all are doing. Thank you all. Looking forward to working with you all now that we have this as part of our portfolio. So as I alluded to earlier, Delegate Chi stole a lot of my questions there. But I do want to point to, you know, I've had the opportunity to work with you all on various things that we've been doing in Baltimore around growing our tech community. One thing I will commend you all for doing is you do a really excellent job of supporting, helping underrepresented groups who are looking for funding, and also supporting those institutions that are helping underrepresented groups. Given the context and climate of our nation, I'm just gonna say it like that, how will you all sustain doing that, and how can we be helpful? Because I think one thing that sets TEDCO apart, maybe from other states, is the fact that we have such a diverse portfolio of the type of founders that you all are supporting. And I want to make sure that we continue doing that, because I think that's something that we can always set ourselves apart, how we can set ourselves apart here in Maryland.
Delegate, it's always good seeing you as well, and appreciate those words. Appreciate the thanks. Just let me cite some stats for the committee. Last year, if I have my numbers correct, less than 1% of all venture capital dollars in this country went to an entity started by someone of color or a woman. Less than 1%. At TEDCO, more than 50% of our investments are going, and that's dollars and number of deals, are going to an entity started by someone of color, a woman, or from our rural areas, which leads me to the point of your question. Look, and Abby said this best as well, and he's heard me say this, innovation doesn't have some monopoly on any one race, gender, university, or area. And we're very proud of the fact that we see opportunities. We don't see geographies, we don't see race, we don't see gender. No, do we track it? Absolutely. We want to see, are we doing a good job with women? Are we doing something with our women entrepreneurs that we need to do a better job of? Or doing something better? As you know, we have our effort called the Urban Business Innovation Initiative. We actually have an individual, Dr. Tamara Lucas, who's in Baltimore, stitching together the ecosystem in Baltimore, making sure that those Baltimore entrepreneurs, we have individuals in each of your regions. We have divided the state into multiple regions. We just actually last week initiated a new effort for Western Maryland called an Entrepreneur in Residence. We've actually, if you will, kind of badged a number of individuals there in Western Maryland. We plan on taking that to other parts of the state, but right now we just have the money for Western Maryland. We are really trying to bring together those efforts in Western Maryland so that all entrepreneurs in Western Maryland know the resources. Doesn't matter the skin color, their gender, their demographics. It's about innovation. It's about creating the acceleration of these opportunities into the state. And so, yes, are we tracking? Absolutely. Are we ensuring that Western Maryland's getting the same resources as the urban areas of the state? Absolutely. Are we tracking? And I'll be very honest and very transparent here because I have been that way. There are certain demographics like the Hispanic community that we've not been as successful in. And we're looking for ways to try to find that out. So we're not, we understand the demographics, I mean, the state of the nation and these conversations. And then we got our lawyers who's helping us make sure we say the right words. And so that's true. But that hasn't stopped the vision and what we're trying to do. And I'll close with, that's been now a year and a half ago, NASDAQ recognized us for this work that we're doing in this area as one of the best in the country. And our logo got put up on the NASDAQ marquee there in Times Square about a year ago. So it's been recognized, the work that we're doing. So thank you for that question.
Hey, thank you. We'll go with Delegate Bhandari next.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, to our Madam Subcommittee Chair, she asked a question about the gaps, from pre-seed research to Series A growth. And you talk about you explain the gaps. So my question is, how is TEDCO currently addressing them? That's one question quickly. And how accessible are these programs for first-time founders, immigrants, and underrepresented communities in Maryland? And you talked a little bit about the measurable outcomes. How does TEDCO use to evaluate access at each stage? And what safeguards are now in place to ensure TEDCO investment primarily benefits our communities in our state while remaining financially sustainable?
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. Let me see if let me try to answer that this way. And if I don't answer it, please correct me. We recognize that every entrepreneur that comes to us has a uniqueness about them. And I mentioned that there's a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, Delegate, and so we have to find a way to reach them and talk to them in a language that they can hear us, right? And so I like the analogy I like to use, and I use a lot of it. I talk in analogies and allegories and all that, just the way I talk. That's the only way I can keep stuff track in my head. Is and we're working on producing a place via our website where you show up, and you're showing up to what I call the House of TEDCO. And when you come to the House of TEDCO, you get a digital concierge, and that digital concierge has a conversation with you or an assessment. And they understand who you are, where you are, and what you're trying to do. And that digital concierge then walks you around the rooms within the House of TEDCO, introducing you to our programs and services that meet you where you are. And they stay with you in that journey. And we have a group called Venture Development that stays with them on that journey. So they understand who they are and what they're trying to do. And many times, one of the things I love about what we do, Delegate, is when we have to have a company do a pivot. We love funding pivots. If someone comes back and says, hey, I didn't get that right, but I now know. I've been in this venture game for, I can say now, decades. And I learned two things from my friends in Silicon Valley. And I'll just talk about the second one. The second was an axiom that you only invest in A-quality people that have a B-quality plan and never the reverse. Never B-quality people with an A-quality plan. And you ask, what's an A-quality person? It's someone that's willing to be coached. And the fundamental answer to everything you just asked is about the coachability of a person. Delegate, I will tell you, if you have a good idea and you go to 10 of your friends, and those 10 friends tell you, man, that is the best idea I've ever seen. And you come to TEDCO and you ask us about that idea, and we look at you and say, those are the only 10 people that's gonna wanna look at that idea. Now, if you want 10 million people to look at that idea, here's what you got to change. You will be surprised how many people choose the 10 over the 10 million. And what I'll say is close, and I know I maybe didn't, is we're doing these metrics to track how we're progressing them along that x-axis. So we actually are tracking, are they making their way through? And we're tracking them by race and gender. And we want to ask ourselves, are we doing something that we should be doing different? We have an effort focused just on women. We have an effort focused on how do we think about them differently. Have an effort focused on our rural communities. I just mentioned the Hispanic communities. And so we have very specific efforts, trying to understand what are we doing that how do we get them to progress along the way? How do we get them to see the 10 million versus the 10? Because that's the hope. The answer to your question is we want folks who want to be coached and are willing to be tracked. And back to the house example, we don't just want to introduce you to the house the first time. We want to call you up when you're 6 months away from a trigger point and say, here are some new rooms you need to go visit. 6 months before you even know you need them. So the answer to the question is, we weren't good at this. I've been here now almost 5.5 years. We weren't very good at tracking those what I call touches. We're much better at tracking those touches now. The answer to your question is, we want to know how we're touching these companies so we can progress them along their journeys. And it's their individual journeys that we actually care about.
Thank you. Would love to follow offline.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Delegate Ahrens.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. For the record, Delegate Humphrey didn't steal any of my questions that Delegate Cheese stole off of him. However, Delegate Cheese's question prompted my question.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted that on the record.
It is, and it's on the record.
One of the things that you mentioned that I thought was pretty interesting when Delegate Cheese was saying something about accountability and are you doing anything about the business climate in Maryland. You kind of alluded, you danced on that one. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit? You don't get involved in any of that?
Well, yeah, remember, we are a state affiliated, we're quasi-state government. So we are outside, none of us are state employees, but obviously, as was asked earlier, a lot of our funding comes from the state. And so in my my government affairs person sitting behind me, and so she's virtually going to kick me if I say anything that,
She's like that.
And so, yeah, so we have just as a policy, and my board, we have a policy that we don't comment on those broad types of items. We just don't. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a point of view, right? Two different things, right?
Okay, taking this a little further out, the
Yeah.
company comes here, we do a great job, all of a sudden they start to grow. I understand they got to pay you back. Why wouldn't this be an integral part? Because you're witnessing companies leaving this state after they use this state's dollars to get them motivated and grow. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, but I will tell you, of the companies that I have been involved with that have left here, I know of, and that's probably been over a dozen, only one has said anything about taxes. The other 11 have been because of manufacturing, talent, or access to capital. That's been the three reasons.
Okay, regulations played no part in any of it.
They didn't tell me that. I'm telling, they didn't tell me that. This is what I'm saying.
And I don't want to tell you how to do your business,
Yeah.
but that would be paramount based on where Maryland sits right now as far as business climate. There's a reason we're sitting here, and I would think that would be a question, and I'm certainly not telling you how to do your job, but that would be one of the biggest questions I would ask somebody, why are you leaving the state? And I'm sure we do that somewhere, but you guys are doing a great job. You're doing yeoman's work as far as getting people to start, and I think their information and those types of questions to them would enlighten our state on where we're going wrong and what we may or may not be able to do better.
I will work
Isn't
with
that
my
so?
marketing and government affairs person to figure out how we can ask those questions. sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank you. That looks like all the questions we have. I'm sure that since this is a new topic for our committee, you'll be hearing follow-up questions from folks, and people have already encouraged you and invited you to meet with them for further discussion. We thank you for your willingness to do that. And that wraps up the briefing, and we're going to start the bill hearings at 1:30, so about 7 minutes.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it, you all.